prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual at Polk County South Jail. This call is not private. It will be recorded and may be monitored. If you believe this should be a private call, please hang up and follow facility instructions to register this number as a private number. To accept charges and consent to this recorded call, press 1. Thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
All praise JAH King. This next speech comes from a second meeting of JAH held in Egypt. Among the nation states that would join in membership at this time was Kenya, led by Jomo Kenyatta, also known as Burning Spear. The choice for Ethiopia's neighboring Egypt to host this conference is significant in that Egypt shares with Ethiopia a past that predates civilizations world over, and a future that expands their boundaries into one another. As Eastern Orthodox Christianity unites them in discipleship, so does the Nile River connect them to JAH life-giving waters. Recorded in JAH Book of Genesis, their influence is forever etched into history. As Emperor Haile Selassie has it, wherever JAH meeting may be, there is a home for all freedom-loving people. Dear friends, we meet again at JAH Summit of Africa. Once more, Africa's leaders have convened to consider in concert past accomplishments, present problems, and future goals of their mother continent. Today, eyes of the world are directed anew to a distinguished gathering of African statesmen and leaders. At Addis Ababa, just 14 months ago, JAH First Conference of Heads of African State and Government was held. Today, JAH Assembly of Heads of State and Government, created by JAH Charter of African Unity that we signed in Addis Ababa, meets in Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt, with long-established civilization. And it is our privilege now to extend to our host, President Gamal Abdel Nasser, warm greetings of JAH Ethiopian government and people, and to express to him our thanks for the gracious and generous hospitality that has been extended to us all in this illustrious country. Ethiopia and other East African countries are linked with the United Arab Republic, not only by history, yet by JAH life-giving waters of Blue Nile, that springs in Ethiopia and in Lake Victoria, annually flooding JAH Great Nile Delta. We also extend greetings today to our African brothers and those nations that join us here for the first time, Kenya and Malawi, states that have at long last taken their rightful places in the Council of Free Africans, and to their valiant leaders, Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta and Prime Minister Hastings Banda. We rejoice at their presence in this hall, and we see in their addition to our rank a portent of hope and confidence for the future of those who remain yet unrepresented in our midst. JAH agenda before us is long. Each of its topics deserves our most thoughtful and careful attention. We pray that our deliberations will be characterized by JAH's same spirit of oneness, JAH's same inspiration, JAH's same courage and determination that marked our meeting at Addis Ababa. If we will, it can be so. Achievements of the month since May of 1963 stand as a favorable augury for a long road that still remains to be traveled to our stated goal of African unity. JAH Organization of African Unity is today a solid and tangible achievement. JAH Charter itself has been ratified by 33 African states, and it was our signal privilege personally to deposit it with the United Nations Organization in October of last year. JAH OAU's Council of Ministers has met not once, yet several times during the last year in seeking a solution to immediate and pressing African problems. A sturdy framework has been provided for closer coordination of national policies and programs in a variety of domains: defensive, economic, and social cooperation, developmental assistance. These and many more have received added impetus from JAH work accomplished by JAH Provisional Secretariat and decisions taken at meetings of several commissions created by JAH Charter of African Unity. Perhaps more important than individual events of these months has been JAH demonstrated vitality of JAH Spirit of Africa, a vitality that has permeated every aspect of intra-African relations and has, in the short space of 14 months, produced a fundamental change in JAH African scene. During the past year, we paid state visits to nearly a dozen African nations, and in JAH Views we exchanged with other African leaders. We encountered a sense of purpose, of devotion and vision that we are persuaded found its genesis and common acceptance of JAH ideal of African unity and JAH common response to a unique challenge that modern Africa presents to each of us in JAH common crusade we are each enlisted. It was in this spirit that Algeria and Morocco put aside their arms and agreed to negotiate settlement of their border dispute. It was this spirit that motivated Ethiopia to call without hesitation upon JAH Organization of African Unity when violence erupted last February on a common frontier with the neighboring Republic of Somalia. It was to this spirit that African nations have responded to calls for aid from their brothers. It is in this spirit that will sweep us forward to final, conclusive, glorious victory in this struggle to overcome obstacles which still remain before us in JAH making of a united Africa. It is in this, we believe, that JAH's real triumph of Africa lives today. Economic development may lag. Difficulties may be encountered in working out unanimously accepted programs and policies. Temporary dissensions may interfere with harmonious relations between individual states. Nevertheless, so long as JAH's spirit of Africa prevails and stirs within us, so long as we continue to think and work and act within JAH African context we have created, imbued by an African atmosphere that surrounds and pervades us, we are confident that goals will be attained. We have created this spirit. It is our child. To bring it to its full potential, we must firstly define with precision and clarity programs that will advance us along JAH path we have chosen, while simultaneously avoiding those dangers that could frustrate what has been so laboriously won. And in order that these programs be coherent and intelligible, they must be founded upon painstakingly articulated principles and policies that we, as African nations, must apply, not only in charting our future of JAH Organization of African Unity, yet as independent African states. What do we seek for Africa? We seek to consolidate and guarantee our own precious liberty as independent nations. We seek freedom for our remaining dependent brothers. We seek Africa's economic growth and development, a realization of JAH way of life of Africans and all men. We seek close collaboration with those others, Asians, Europeans, North and South Americans, who share our desires and who are willing to cooperate with us. We seek self-sufficiency that will enable us to play our rightful role in international affairs and live in full harmony with all men. We seek to make our voices heard and our views heeded on major problems confronting the world today. Our quest, above all else, is to assure to Africa and to each African state a fullest and most complete measure of freedom. Freedom from all remnants of colonialism. Freedom from neocolonialism in whatever form. Freedom from political and military threats. Freedom from aggression. Freedom from interference by others in our internal affairs. Freedom from economic domination. Freedom from danger of nuclear destruction. This is easy to state. How infinitely more difficult it is to achieve. We are convinced that it is in our search for African unity that we shall discover solutions to vexing problems which confront us. We have brought upon ourselves liberation of remaining dependent territories of the African continent, such as Angola, Mozambique, and southern Rhodesia, and elimination of apartheid. This battle must and shall be won. Yet, if our victory is to be real and not ephemeral, it is we Africans who must achieve it. We can accept assistance from those who seek the same ends, only if the other precious freedoms we equally cherish are not thereby prejudiced. In our struggle to eliminate from the African continent the ugly sore of apartheid, so repugnant and loathsome to us Africans, unhappily, all too little progress has been recorded. Much has been said and written in condemnation of this most ignoble and inhumane form of abasement by man of his fellows. Each one of us here has roundly and unequivocally condemned this evil. Yet, what have these words accomplished? To what results have our condemnations led? Of what effect has been our attacks, our criticisms? If we are truthful with ourselves, we must admit that there yet remains far to go in eliminating racial discrimination from our continent. We must, first of all, look to our own efforts. We have declared that all economic ties with South Africa must be terminated. Have we done so? We have declared that diplomatic relations with Portugal must be severed. Do Portuguese envoys still grace African capitals? In both of these areas, have we acted in unity? Since this is fundamentally a human question, we can take heart that at our side in our struggle against apartheid are ranged a vast majority of human race. Still, to justify their support, we must ourselves militantly enforce measures that we have agreed upon. It is not strength or power or determination of those who oppose us that will delay success in this battle, only weakness of our unity. Admittingly, our task is not an easy one. Immediate sacrifices are required. Ethiopia's ties with Portugal stretch back to the 16th century, and our relations with that nation have always been amicable. It was not easy to request a recall of the Portuguese ambassador accredited to our court, and we did so. Had we not, we cannot stand before you today and declare that Ethiopia has done what principle and conscience and what blood of our brothers in South Africa and Angola and Mozambique required of us. Similarly, Ethiopia has recognized the provisional government in exile established under leadership of Mr. Holden Roberto. It may well be that even the united weight of free nations of Africa is inadequate to bring to their right mind the governments of South Africa and Portugal. Assistance is required, and it will be welcome if it comes without conditions. Let us bring combined pressure of African influence to bear on those other nations of the world to whom our friendship and goodwill are meaningful, who claim adherence to JAH's same principles of freedom and independence for all men that we uphold, who affirm their support for our struggle against oppression. Let us move effectively, marshal our individual and collective forces to use our influence, to exploit our position in various international organs, to enlist their support in Africa's fight for freedom and development. By combining our efforts with these others, freedom can come earlier to our remaining dependent brothers. With their aid, we can soon sweep the stigma of racial discrimination from Africa. Let there be no mistake. Continued oppression of Africans on this continent and continued domination of our South African brothers
You have 1 minute left.
constitute grave dangers which threaten those very foundations of JAH unity we seek. We cannot rest while these twin evils live on. These are not the only dangers which threaten us. Disputes between African states themselves constitute potentially serious obstacles in our path. Foremost among causes of such disputes are those of the sort which have exasperated relations during the past year Algeria, as well as being between Ethiopia and Kenya and Somalia.
This is a prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual at Polk County South Jail. This call is not private. It will be recorded and may be monitored. If you believe this should be a private call, please hang up and follow facility instructions to register this number as a private number. To accept charges and consent to this recorded call, press 1. To thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
At Addis Ababa, enough was said to demonstrate beyond doubt that Africans are virtually unanimous in their agreement that only by acceptance of frontiers bequeathed to them by the colonialists can permanent peace reign on our continent. Principle of respect for territorial integrity of states is repeated in JAH charter no less than 3 times, and it is only for us to observe it as thoroughly as it deserves. Ethiopia supports this view, although she herself suffered no less than others from the depredations of the imperialists. We must, meanwhile, go still further. JAH Charter has accurately and adequately defined principles to where we have pledged our adherence. Africans, like all other peoples, possess not only virtues, but weaknesses, and it is perhaps inevitable that differences will arise among us from time to time. Just as Africa, as a single entity, and several African states individually toil for peaceful settlement of disputes among nations, so must we ensure that disputes in Africa are settled peacefully. If our continent is not free of internecine strife, how can we hope to influence others whose disputes endanger peace of the world? In like manner, JAH Charter signatories have declared their adherence to a complementary principle of non-interference in internal affairs of other states, and this principle must be rigidly observed if conflict between Africans are to be avoided. It is all too often under a guise of territorial disputes and through a medium of subversive activity directed against legitimate governments that foreign influences we seek to bar from our continent endeavor to exert their power and establish themselves a foothold to expand their activities. We must guard against insidious substitution of one form of dominance and rule for another. We must be vigilant to inhibit growth of what is called neocolonialism. Neocolonialism today takes 2 forms, economic and political. We recognize that economic dominance is not only often more difficult to eliminate, but often serves as an entering wedge for political domination. We further recognize that given the history of our continent and conditions under where we came to freedom, it is not unusual that despite our best efforts, economic independence we seek is long and difficult in coming. Long-established patterns of trade are not easily or quickly reoriented. Let us not delude ourselves into thinking that these facts, for such they are of no significance for the future of Africa. Let us at the same time toil with all our strength to alter them. When we consider political neocolonialism, our desires, although perhaps no less difficult of attainment, are at least easier of articulation. We seek to avoid a rigid and inflexible posture which prejudices our position on major issues before the world. We seek to avoid alignment, to achieve true non-alignment. Our late good friend, Prime Minister Nehru of India, put it thus: the only camp we should like to be in is the camp of peace and goodwill. At Belgrade, in September of 1961, we stated that our essence of non-alignment was to be impartial to judge actions and policies objectively, as we see them either contributing to or detracting from resolution of the world's problems, preservation of peace, and improvement of the general level of man's living conditions. Those who righteously denounce one side on every major problem or issue, while reserving nothing but praise for the other, cannot claim to be non-aligned. We may from one day to the next find ourselves now opposing, now supporting, now voting against, first the East, next the West. It is JAH worth of the policies themselves, we say, and not their source or sponsor, that determines the position of one who is truly non-aligned. We repeat, the non-alignment is in no way anti-Eastern or anti-Western, any more than it is anti-Northern or anti-Southern. It is neither anti nor pro in any absolute fashion. It is largely affirmative, not negative. It is for peace and freedom. It is for a decent standard of living for all men. It is for JAH right of people of any nation to adopt that economic and political system where the majority of them freely elect to follow. It is for JAH right of men and nations freely to take their stand on great issues of the day as their consciences and their sense of right and justice, and these alone, dictate. It should be clear, moreover, that as Africans embracing this principle, we're not choosing to form a third bloc, a suprapower that can only speak with a single voice because it is controlled and dictated by a single organ. What we seek to create is flexible, not inflexible, a moral force to be used for world peace, for economic development, and a benefit of humanity. We cannot impose our views by force. We have only JAH power of moral persuasion. This is our strength, and a great strength, if we will just use it. And finally, there exists today, not for Africa alone, yet for all mankind, a danger of extinction of human race by nuclear holocaust. We have asserted in the past, and we reiterate now, that Africa must be declared a denuclearized zone. We urge again that efforts to achieve a progressive disarmament be redoubled. A limited nuclear test ban treaty constitutes a step in this direction, and it should be first of many. Our united efforts must be exerted to this end. What must we do to transform our aspirations into reality, to overcome dangers of those we have referred, to advance to JAH destiny we have marked out for ourselves? We have spoken in the past of some concrete measures to be taken. Creation of a permanent machinery to settle intra-African disputes is one such. We must take up where colonialists left off in transforming social and economic patterns of our nations. In order to decrease our economic dependence on developed nations, trade among African nations must be expanded. Transportation and communication facilities among us must be improved. A unified African development program that utilizes to JAH fullest individual resources of individual African states must be prepared and implemented. Techniques must be found and employed for the most efficient and economic use of our resources and financial means. In all of this, we can profit from the example of both JAH East and West. Is this enough? Let us only say that if even a partial measure of these programs can be agreed upon here, our presence in Cairo today will have been more than justified. We would as well add these last requirements. What is needed, above all, is patience that accepts delays while striving to overcome them, and tolerance that comprehends our weaknesses, our selfish ambitions, and our narrow self-interest, while seeking to strengthen our will and stiffen our moral fiber and devotion to principle and international morality. This can alone arm and shield and support us among daily strife that is our fate as we toil to better a lot of Africa and all men everywhere. Unless we find JAH requisite courage and fixity of purpose to rise above our petty selves, we shall be broken on a wheel of our own invention Africa that surrounds our deliberations here is deserving of greatness Africa demands of it. Let us prove ourselves worthy. Emperor Haile Selassie JAH I, July 21st, 1964. Some may ask what happened to this OAU. They may assume JAH King is not worthy if the endeavors he sought to create did not last. Some may ask, if Haile Selassie is King of Kings, how was he overthrown? They may assume JAH King is not worthy of JAH's title, because if he were, he would have remained JAH King for life. Would they count Moses as not being worthy? Don't they know that Moses didn't reach JAH's promised land? Wouldn't they see Gideon as doing good in rescuing JAH Israelites from the Midian? Yet it was Gideon's son who slew his other sons. And was not Eli JAH priest blessed, yet his house became cursed forever because of the lewdness of his sons? And even though King David was called to build JAH house, he was prevented from doing so because his hands were not cleansed from bloodshed. Who would say that King David was not worthy of honor? His son, King Solomon, rebelled against Yahweh to worship strange gods, and JAH's kingdom was torn. Yet Scripture speaks of a man who surpassed all in riches and wisdom. Contrariwise, King Josiah did right, so that all his days JAH's children departed not from following Lord. Nevertheless, only a few months after his reign, Jerusalem was invaded by Egypt in a period that led up to the Babylonian conquest and captivity of JAH's people. Who would say this was King Josiah's doing? Even as we discovered at JAH's time of King Hezekiah, this time was predetermined. Knowing this, why would have King Josiah, Hezekiah's great-grandson, even bothered, for example, to have JAH house repaired? You see, there is more to life than this world has to offer. JAH's kingdom is not reserved for a finite time and space. It is faith that binds the wounds if we work with it to care for those in need. JAH house, founded on faith, is that temple of righteousness that exists within us. When King David assembled JAH nobles to make preparations to build a dwelling place for JAH, he stated, "Set your heart and your soul to seek JAH Lord your God. Arise and build JAH sanctuary, to bring JAH Ark of Covenant in." Are we to believe that because Jerusalem was ransacked those so many years after, that somehow JAH Covenant was not alive? Or are we to expect that JAH Covenant is not made for a time and place, inasmuch as it is made for a people that choose to abide in it? Even Jeroboam had a choice. He inherited 10 tribes. Our choice is ever before us. We don't decide what is to come, yet through faith we rest knowing that our deeds will not go without notice, that JAH see and know. Haile Selassie created JAH OAU as a house for us to live in without fear, free from domination by the world class, and a place for us to prosper. The world thinks that if you can go through tribulation, you're not worthy. The world says, how can a man be righteous if he is cursed? What about the man they call Jesus? Did he not suffer for righteousness? JAH King is not
You have 1 minute left.
because he was kidnapped at gunpoint. JAH King is worthy because his followers have faith. Our house may be dilapidated, and in need of repair. This does not mean it is good for nothing. For if JAH foundation is laid, our faith is secure. It is now our duty to restore our soul to that place JAH seeks to dwell in. As King David says, take heed now, for Lord has chosen you to build a house for JAH's sanctuary. Be strong. This is Ross Rebirth. And all our people say,
JAH,
JAH,
Rastafari.
And all our people say,
JAH, Rastafari.
And all our people say,
JAH,
JAH,
Rastafari.
Appearance. Goodbye.